pulled pork. This is a perfect one for beginners because it's relatively easy to make, and a cut like this is only going to cost you around $20. But before we prepare our meat, we're going to get stuck into setting our barbecue up. We're going to be using our blackjack kettle in this video, but if you've got another style of kettle barbecue like a Weber kettle, you can easily follow along to this video. And all we're going to do is open it up, take our cooking grate off, and then you want to get some good quality briquettes. And then in a row of two, we're going to stack our briquettes halfway around the front of our charcoal grate in a domino fashion. And then we're going to build another row of two on top, but if you're using some larger briquettes, you can probably just do a single row through the middle. Now, how long you build your snake is going to be based on how long your cook's going to be, but if you're unsure, you can always just build it longer than what you think you're going to need, and then if you've got any briquettes left over at the end of the cook, you can always use them in your next cook. But now we've built our snake, all I'm going to do now is get a firelighter down, then I'll get a charcoal chimney with about 12 briquettes on top of that. So while our briquettes are catching light, we're going to prepare our pork. As you can see, we're using a pork scotch fillet. This one costs around $23 and it weighs around 1.3 kilos. So all I'm going to do is take it out of its packaging and trim off any excess fat and silver skin. Now there's a few reasons I love using pork scotch. It's because they are widely available. You'll find them in every butcher and supermarket. They don't need much trimming. They're boneless, and like I've mentioned, they're quite cheap as well. Now honestly, that's as far as I'm going to go trimming this one. That didn't need pretty much anything at all, and I honestly could have just left that one untrimmed. So what I'm going to do now is season it up. First, I'm just going to go down with a light coat of yellow mustard. This is purely just to help our rub stick to the meat. So if you really don't like yellow mustard, you could use some other types of sauce or even olive oil. Then you can get your pork scotch seasoned up in your favorite rub or combination of rubs. I'm going to be using some of our honey soy slammer for some sweetness, and then I'm going to top it off with some steak shooter, which will give us some nice savory notes and a good color. And don't forget, our range of barbecue rubs and much more are available on our website at lowandslowbasics.com.au. And if you're a member of our Patreon, you get some extra special discounts plus many more perks. And now we're just going to let our pork scotch sit so those flavors can settle in until our barbecue's ready. All right, now our briquettes are pretty much ready, so we're going to dump them in at the start of our snake, the way the briquettes are falling. Then we'll stack them up nicely, and I'm going to lay down a couple chunks of cherry wood. I'll lay one right about there, and then this one will go on at the start of our snake once our barbecue's up to temperature. And you want to be mindful of the wood chunk size you're using. Here's another chunk. This one is quite thick and large compared to the other two we're using. If I was to use a chunk this size, we'd potentially smother our fire and cause dirty smoke. So make sure you're using a wood chunk size that will burn clean and efficiently without smothering your fire. But now our briquettes are in, we can shut our lid, open up both of our vents, and we'll start bringing our barbecue up to temperature. For this cook, I want to be at around 275 Fahrenheit or 135 Celsius, and I'm honestly not going to be too fussy if I'm anywhere between 250 Fahrenheit or 120 Celsius or all the way up to 300 Fahrenheit or 150 Celsius. And by letting our barbecue preheat, those wood chunks are going to preheat as well as those briquettes, and that way they're all going to catch light and burn nice and clean throughout this whole cook without producing any dirty smoke. Now I get a lot of questions and comments with concerns about the snake method and if it produces dirty smoke because we're using a bunch of unlit briquettes. But like I said, if we're preheating them properly, they'll catch light and burn efficiently throughout this cook. And another thing that's going to help our snake burn nice and clean is using some good quality briquettes. My advice is stay away from the cheap and nasty briquettes. A lot of them contain chemicals, so spend a few extra dollars and try and get some chemical-free, good quality briquettes. All right, now after almost 10 minutes, we're up to just below 250 Fahrenheit or 120 Celsius. So we'll open our smoker and get that chunk of smoking wood on at the start of our snake. Then I'll get a drip tray down, followed by our cooking grate and then our pork scotch. And now we'll shut our lid and let that smoke away. So now our pork's on, all I've really got to worry about for the first few hours of this cook or until we wrap this pork up is some fire management. So once our temperature recovers to that 250 Fahrenheit or 120 Celsius, I'm going to shut our bottom vent down to almost closed. Then I'll give our barbecue 15 to 20 minutes to see where it stabilizes off at. And if I need to increase temperature, I'll just open that bottom vent up a little bit. Or if I need to decrease temperature, I'll just shut it down a little bit. Now, fire management is going to be very different every cook. The weather's going to be a factor, the type of briquettes you use, and how much meat you're smoking. So if you want to delve a little bit deeper into fire management for a kettle style barbecue, I'll put a video link down in the video description for you to check out. But for now, I'm going to let this pork scotch smoke away for a few hours and we'll check in on it throughout this cook. All right, so we are coming up to 2 hours into this cook now. This is starting to look really nice. It's just a few spots where I want that rub to set a bit more, and the top's starting to look a little dry. So all I'm going to do is just spritz it with some water. That's just going to help keep it nice and juicy. But now we'll shut our lid and let this go for around another hour until that rub has set a little bit more, and then we'll look to wrap it up. All right, so we're a bit over 3 hours into this cook, and I reckon we're ready to wrap this pork up. That color's looking amazing, and that rub's set on the meat. And we're right around 70 degrees Celsius internally, which is where I like to be when we wrap. So now we'll take our pork scotch out and get it into a foil tray. Then we'll quickly come back to the barbecue because I want to shut the lid and both vents. Then on top of our pork scotch, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of butter. Then over the top, I'm going to pour over around 2 cups of apple juice. But if you wanted some more savory notes, you could use chicken stock instead. Then I'm going to cover our tray in 2 layers of good quality foil. And now our pork scotch is all wrapped up. It's not going to take on any more smoke. So to make life easier, we're going to finish it off in the oven. I'm going to keep running the same temperatures, and we're just going to take it until it's probing tender around that 96 Celsius or 205 Fahrenheit internal mark, which I reckon will take another 2 to 3 hours. So that's why I've shut down the vents on the barbecue. We don't have to worry about fire management anymore, and any leftover briquettes we can use for the next cook. All right, so after 3 hours unwrapped in the barbecue and 2 hours wrapped up in the oven, so 5 hours total into this cook, I reckon our pork scotch is ready. So let's take this foil off and have a probe around. Alright, so as you can see, that is probing super soft, and as you can see, we're right around that 96 to 98 degrees Celsius internal mark. So what I'm going to do now is just leave that foil off for a few minutes so our pork scotch can steam off and that cooking process will stop. And then after a few minutes, I'll cover it back over with foil and just let it rest at room temperature for about an hour before we come back to pull it apart. Alright, we're just about ready to pull this pork apart, but I thought I'd share a quick tip just to save you burning your hands. I like to put some undergloves on. These are just cheap gardening gloves you can pick up from any hardware store. And then over the top of that, you can put your food safe disposable gloves. And now I'm not going to burn my hands when I pull this pork apart. So now we'll take the foil off, and then I'm going to drain most of that liquid in the foil tray into a cup. And then once we've pulled the pork apart, we can reintroduce as much of that liquid as we like to give us some extra flavor and moisture. That's really good. That's got a nice smoke flavor, sweetness, savoriness, tender, juicy, and full of flavor. And here's how I'm going to serve it. So on some brioche sliders, we'll go down with a little handful of our pulled pork, then we'll place some pickles on top, and then our hookshot whiskey and jalapeno barbecue sauce. So simple and tasty. Well, there you have it. There's how to make pulled pork for beginners in a charcoal barbecue. And if you're wondering what I'm going to do with the leftover pulled pork, I'm going to portion it up, vac seal it, freeze it, and then I can use it in other recipes, or I can give it to some family and friends. But if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to ask them in the comments below. I'm going to go enjoy the rest of those sliders off camera. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.